Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on DNA Valley. You obviously have been a big factor in growing this area through a lot of history here, working in commerce and being just a general mover shaker in the area. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today, and I can't wait to talk to you about your thoughts, ideas, predictions for the future. You know, just to start off, if you don't mind, a little bit of personal stuff. Yeah. So I understand that you were born in Michigan and grew up there. What brought you to Maryland?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for having me. And I would say you are as much or more of any mover shaker in this industry in Maryland as anybody else. You've done amazing things here. So thank you for having me here today.
I'm humbled. I really thank you so much for saying something like that. But yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. But let's get back to...
I grew up in Michigan. I was born there, you know, blue-collar family, and there was a couple of things to do in Michigan when you graduated from high school. You could go work for one of the big three, Chrysler, GM, or Ford, in Warren, Michigan. They were all headquartered back in the day there, or you could go to college. I went to college, Eastern Michigan University. I was there for 2 years. I got married. I had babies. I left college. My husband and I, at the time, when he graduated from Michigan State University, we moved to Rochester, New York, where he worked at Kodak. And that's where we raised our children for a majority of their childhood, had a wonderful life. But if anybody knows the history of Eastman Kodak from back in the day, they made a very different decision what they should have made when it came to digital photography. So we decided to look for another opportunity before things got too bad in Rochester. My kids were going into high school. We wanted to get them settled for their high school years.
You actually saw it coming. I mean, Eastman Kodak is just famous. It's like probably a business case at most business schools across the country.
It is the most amazing business case, and we lived through that. We saw the size of Eastman Kodak shrink to a very minuscule size, and so we decided to make a move. So we moved down here to Maryland. He got a job with another company, and we settled in Frederick, Maryland, and that's where my kids kind of finished their growing up, and I still live there to this day and just absolutely love it here in Maryland. It's home.
Yeah, you know, that I had a similar experience moving to Maryland. I didn't really expect it. For me, it was kind of like a flyover state, even though it's not officially one. But when I arrived here, I was just amazed at, you know, the community and, you know, just I felt this incredible synergy because this area just has it all.
It really does. And I thought it was amazing for us to, as my children were getting older, to get them to a more diverse type of surroundings for them. And these industries that we're talking about today, I never had that connection to them at any other places where I lived. And it's amazing to be able to see that, to understand the type of knowledge and the centered knowledge because of our proximity, of course, to Washington, D.C. and our assets with federal laboratories and all of that. But they really are stars for Maryland, and I could go on and on about why I love Maryland. You have Western Maryland, you have Eastern Shore, you have everything in between, and it's just such a wonderful place to be able to have your children explore different opportunities.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's a lot of different places that you can choose to live here, and you can kind of choose the character. But one thing that's amazing about Maryland is the educational, the commitment to education. Yeah. Right? And you just find that wherever you go, the schools are excellent. And, or let's say, you know, a cut above a lot of places across the country. And these are just fundamental aspects that we're talking about that make this great soil for kind of growing anything. And then, you know, it turns out a lot of really great high tech and biotech is sprouting up here, and you can see why that would be natural, right, in the shadow of D.C. and, like you said, all those federal institutes, and then a lot of them do lean towards biotech and healthcare, and so it seems completely natural that this would be a great place for, you know, what I think is becoming a revolution in pharmaceuticals. You know, but we'll get into that more. But let's talk a little bit more about your history. So, you know, tell us about your journey to becoming Secretary of Commerce.
Oh, such a journey. When I moved here to Maryland, just way back in 2003, I decided I was going to finish my college education now that my kids were a little bit older. And so I went to Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, and finished my bachelor's degree there and started doing some internships and just feeling myself around with some folks, and got involved with a couple of political policy makers, Senator David Brinkley, who was the senator at the time and now former Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management. Started working with him. I decided to run my own campaign in 2010, so I represented Frederick County in the House of Delegates. I won that election and just made a lot of interactions and took every opportunity and site that I could see. I worked for defense contractors. I did program management for them, and then started with a partner of my cybersecurity company back in the day, back in 2013, 2014. When Governor Hogan was elected to office, he approached me and asked if I would be willing to join the administration in 2015, and I was still a member of the House of Delegates, and I said, sure, but I have very specific things that I want to be able to do, so I won't leave my jobs for anything other than to be the Secretary of Labor. And he said, why in the heck do you want that job? That's a really hard job. And I said, because it's an area that I know everybody, whether you're a business or you're an employee or you're just part of the community, it touches everybody's lives, and I knew that it could be done better than what was happening.
Wow.
So I took on that position. So I was the Secretary of Labor, a member of the governor's cabinet for 4 years. And then when he was reelected, I moved from the Department of Labor to become the Secretary of the Department of Commerce. And that was an amazing experience. Learned a lot of the similar people that I had been working with at the other state agency at Labor, but just in a different capacity, all talking about growth of the industries, whether it be workforce development or economic development. You need both in order for growth and prosperity to happen. So then, I was not really doing anything for a little while, and the former CEO, Marty Rosendale, who's been a great friend, and I've worked with the Maryland Tech Council at many different levels with both agencies. He came to me one day and said that he wanted to retire, and the board was looking for him to find the perfect person to take over for him, and he asked me to consider it, and here I am today.
Wow, I got to say, what a catch for Maryland Tech Council. You were, really the perfect person, and Marty was doing a great job, and it was going to be very hard to replace him. But I think he really he managed to do it. He managed to maintain the momentum by getting somebody that is, when I listen to you, public service just runs through your history, right? Yeah. And also, even your background is kind of the salt of the Maryland area, that you really have moved through all these different economic layers. You've seen different parts of the country. You've run your own business. You actually broke your college career, to do I hate to say this because I'm not sure whether this is like politically incorrect, but the mommy track for a while.
It was
right?
great.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. It was a great decision, right? So we all go down different paths, and where we are in our current state, like where I am today, is a product of everything that I've done in my past, just like everybody
Exactly,
else.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot from those experiences. But what I knew from my previous experiences, whatever I was going to do in the future after leaving the administration, it was still going to have to be mission-oriented. Mm-hmm. And I understand that about myself. I have to be mission-oriented. And I looked at the Maryland Tech Council as a way to continue on the mission that I have already been on through my course of public service. Mm-hmm. Many interactions with them. The goal is to create the industries, biohealth, life sciences, technology in general, so that Maryland is the premier state. We have the best ecosystem in the country, and people want to come here because of the talent and the assets and the resources that we have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about all of those things. And have you ever sort of thought, because sometimes I feel like where you end up, if you are really open to being drawn to something that you're passionate about, you realize looking back that everything in your life kind of led up to that. And here you are at the nexus of high tech, and economic growth and opportunity, and the human capital, and then you look at each of these sort of little dots in sort of events in your life, and it does sound like just really the perfect place for you to be right now.
It is. I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity. It's really wonderful. The people that I work with are great. Obviously, the industries I know well. I have worked with them at lots of different levels in the past. So it's not a foreign type of a new job for me, and I think I was able to kind of attach myself to it pretty easily and kind of pick up where the good foundation and the infrastructure was laid with Marty and the team in the past, being able to build it up to where it is now. And now we are on a trajectory of growth, which I think is the very obvious next step. And to talk about new ways to collaborate, to create new partnerships, so that every part of the state, because we are a statewide council, we do have statewide representation, how we all work together to make sure that Maryland is seen as Maryland, which is high tech, high bio, the best place for people to be.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of drawing in resources and people from other areas, that would be really valuable. But of course, we have this amazing set of resources to start with. So, wow, I mean, you must have tremendous amount of plans. But can you share a 30,000-foot view of sort of your ideas and thoughts for as you continue to increase the momentum of what's going on here and continue really, when you talk about what Maryland Tech Council was doing, remember they've made a bit of a transition from tech to biotech. And even when it was more tech focused and a little less emphasizing biotech, you were everywhere. Because I've been here now, for more than 10 years, and you've been, during your time as Secretary of Commerce, you were everywhere, and so, all right, so you've been participating in this for a long time. Now you've taken the reins of the Maryland Tech Council. What are the sort of things that we should be looking for? Yeah,
so because I have been everywhere, I've seen a lot of things and I have a lot of ideas. So my number one goal is to remain focused and not get too spread out, because my team, they look at me and they're like, yeah, that's great. But we have, a small consolidated team. So we have to do it smart. And I think that's true with any business. You have to have strategic growth patterns. You have to say where you're going to go, what you're going to do, and have a strategy behind it. So the good thing is that where we sit today, just earlier this week, we announced that we have surpassed 700 members in the Tech Council. And so that is representative of over 150,000 employees within the industries that are represented by us, which is significant. And also, as just a timestamp, since last July, we've built upon that membership by almost 150 members.
That's so a huge
already
amount of growth,
been on a growth pattern, which is good. Like you said, we are Maryland's delegation for Maryland Bio. So for the National Bio Organization, we are the organization in Maryland for that. And then, so everything plus technology in general, everything from cybersecurity, IT, software development, and emerging technologies, which is where we want to grow a little bit more too. Because when we talk about emerging energy technology, agriculture technology, advanced manufacturing, all of that is new and it's big, and they don't necessarily have an advocacy association, networking association for those technologies that are coming out. But even more importantly, they all have a tie-in to bio.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So when we're looking to create ecosystems and how they can all feed off of each other, I think those are the natural next steps for us to move into. And we have some pretty big names in those industries that are getting ready to be announced as new members of the Tech Council. So that's going to be an exciting path for us to open it up to lots of collaboration amongst industry leaders. And so that's very important. We're also looking, and we started about a year ago, in developing chapters of the Maryland Tech Council, local regional chapters. And we have 3. One, the first, is just celebrating their first year anniversary, and that's a Prince George's chapter of the Maryland Tech Council. And from there, we went to a Baltimore regional chapter, which is obviously Baltimore City, Baltimore County generated. Lots of activity happening up there, as you might expect, because of our higher academia and those secondary schools and what's coming out of those emerging bodies. And then the Chesapeake region. And that's a really great, fun group, and they want to focus a lot on GovCon and what that can do with, interacting with the federal government and different types of federal partnerships that come from there as well. So very well-established companies that have had similar types of tech councils in the past have come under our umbrella. So we're looking at expanding into other geographical regions as well across the state, under the guise of really being that statewide go-to resource where we can connect, but still have local flavor where we need to have local flavor.
Yeah, that's it. Kind of reminds me of the point that there are so many different regions of Maryland with different character and different mixes of businesses and different opportunities, but a lot of them are sort of on a trajectory to high tech. Yes. And traditionally in this area, being in the shadow of DC, the reliable revenue and sort of growth opportunities were government related, and we haven't lost that, have we? Right? I mean, you brought that up, and now we're sort of layering on opportunities in what is becoming a revolution in pharmaceutical development.
That's right.
And that on top of that, this was sort of the vaccine, epicenter of, I don't know how wide you'd go, but maybe even the world, right? There's just, it's sort of like we have 2 legs to stand on, right? We can serve the entire nation through our proximity to the federal government. And at the same time now, it's become natural that a new form of drug development, a new sector of biotech is just naturally taking off like a rocket around here.
It really is. And we can continue to grow exponentially as long as we continue to have the talent to support it. Right. So that's where I think the idea of a bigger ecosystem comes into the highlight of what we need to focus on. And we have. And, in any given year, there's about 30,000 unfilled jobs in these high-tech industries in the state of Maryland. And we can continue to educate them at different levels. We can continue to train them. But how do we scale those opportunities so that we can continue to supply the great talent, everything from the PhD level down to the entry-level position, which we know we need so much of with our manufacturing at this point in time. So the Maryland Tech Council has entered into a workforce development opportunity. It's called BioHub Maryland. And it is to help with the training of those very specific needs of our industry leaders. So we're building a BioHub where it will immediately be online virtual training, but it then will grow into, hopefully by the end of this year, a hands-on opportunity to teach kids and adults, returning veterans, anybody that wants to take on that new career path, in a hands-on simulated environment for manufacturing, which is happening all up and down the 270 corridor right now, which is super important.
Yeah, I mean, you're really considering all layers of this revolution, and this isn't the first time that you've gotten involved with workforce development. I mean, as Secretary of Labor, you contributed to the astronomical growth of the apprenticeship program. And, what a great way to fill these jobs, right? Because education and experience at the same time. And, tell us a little bit about that program, because didn't you end up getting more than 10,000 apprenticeships? Yeah,
they're even growing even faster now, which is great, because when we got to the Department of Labor in 2015, we knew that there was this workforce shortage, right? We had to be able to get people into programs. There was a lot of difficult to retain people in jobs. They were doing a lot of bouncing around. And what we have seen is that by implementing apprenticeships, and by apprenticeships I mean non-traditional apprenticeships, right? There's apprenticeships that you can go and you can be a plumber, an electrician, an HVAC, and by the way, those are great jobs and there's a shortage of them too, and you're always going to have a job if you go into those careers. But there's also that same lifestyle, that same learning capability of the earn and learn and train, right? And it's that hands-on type of experience partnered with that educational training component of it that works really well, and it develops great relationships between employers and employees. So we said, let's do something great and do non-traditional apprenticeships and create that model, which is outside of the having to go to a 4-year university and get, spend lots of time in school before you go into the environment, which you don't have access to typically when you're in a college environment. So we started that, and it's starting to really grow. And just talking about it every day and explaining a different way to disrupt that training cycle for people to get intricately involved in the position that they want to be able to fulfill in the future, having it start earlier. It's such a great idea. And so we're doing much more of that, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, we do a lot of internships at AGT, and it almost sounds like what you're talking about with the apprenticeship program and how you're being, sort of thinking out of the box there and, modifying it to suit new industries. It sounds a little bit like it blends into, what we consider around here internships, because we pay all our interns, it's not $15 an hour is, barely a living wage, but it does provide education for them, pocket money, right, and an opportunity to engage with a industry member that will give you relevant experience to enter the job market anywhere. And frequently, we end up hiring our interns, right? Because you form a relationship with them.
Right? Yeah. That's a great opportunity for them, right? It's a little training. And internships and apprenticeships, there's a lot of similarities. I would only say that the difference between an apprenticeship is that it's an elongated process. So it would probably be a 2-3 year process where there are very specific goals in their training courses that they will eventually learn on the job and through their educational requirements. And like with any traditional apprenticeship, you get paid more with the more certifications that you receive, the more training, the different way of doing things. And so it's just a longer relationship. Internships have been used forever in this industry and in, high-tech kind of jobs, and those will never go away.
Right.
But if you're looking for very specific types of training that you can do, or a business wants to be able to create, new entry-level type positions to bring people in and have them move up through their structure, apprenticeships is a great way to go.
Yeah. I'm glad you clarified that for me, because I do see even a lot of things in the way that you're describing the differences as maybe opportunities to improve the idea of internships or maybe migrate them to actual apprenticeships in areas where there are a set of skills that you need to acquire before you become fully productive, and sometimes certifications, right?
Exactly.
When you
sometimes those are the most important.
Yeah.
It's a desired skill.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunity in there, and again, you've got a vacuum within the industry right now for talent, which is really the opposite of when I came here. So if you think about when I first started engaging with sort of the community, might have been like in the second year of AGT's history. So it was, sort of 2008, 2009 timeframe. And what I remember hearing is that we created 90,000 what would you call them, STEM graduates for whom we didn't have employment at the time.
Interesting.
And they were actually, then going out and finding productive jobs in Boston, San Francisco, other places, right? So we had this terrific educational system, but what we were doing is sort of educating for the country. and we were losing those resources because we couldn't employ them. And now it does seem to have flipped, right? Where, we don't have enough STEM graduates to fill all the jobs that are around here. You just said, 30,000 jobs that were unfilled. And, that's a major amount of demand, isn't it?
It is a major amount of demand. And I would say that going back to the early 2000s, and I call it exporting of our talent, we exported a lot of talent.
Yeah.
We still continue to export a lot of talent. And I think that's where some of our tech community needs to kind of rally. And we talked about this before, but planting the flag, making sure that the talent that we're producing in our secondary educational, universities and colleges, that they know Maryland is the place to be.
Yeah.
Right? We need for them to know that they don't have to go out west or up north or down south, that there are those opportunities that are here. And I'll just say that theoretically, by getting them and including them into that process while they're already in a college environment or training environments or wanting to get involved in the industry as a career pathway in general, that's a way to keep our homegrown talent here in Maryland by getting them involved in the ecosystem very early on so that they know how many of those opportunities exist.
I mean, you are so right about what is here and the idea of sort of migrating our image, right? And it's interesting that you're saying that within our local populace, we need to, better educate them to the opportunities that are here. But I actually think at this point that when you talk about planting a flag, I think it's reasonable for us to say that this is maybe one of the best growth opportunities in the United States, if not the world, that we are on the precipice of a revolution in biotech, that gene and cell therapy is a new way of developing drugs that opens up this, could change the pharmaceutical industry from $1.6 billion a year to $20 billion a year. And we can get an outsized proportion of that because first, we're the epicenter of where it all began, in the shadow of the Human Genome Project, in the shadow of the Francis Collins-run NIH. There was a huge emphasis on genetics, on all of the tools and all of the techniques associated with understanding systems biology, how the body works, how genetics affects that, and tools for actually modifying DNA, viral vectors, and maybe CRISPR didn't start in this area, but we're vector agnostic, right? That's just the delivery mechanism. What we're studying is the modifications that we can make that can have huge healthcare benefits. And we're talking about, there might be 10,000 diseases that will eventually be within the scope of this. And it is really happening here.
It is. It is really happening here. And it's happening at AGT, right? But it's happening in lots of other companies, both big and small.
Yeah.
And then it's happening in the federal laboratories, right? So how do we make sure that that community is all talking to each other and that there's opportunities for those growth and to communicate the amount of growth that's happening?
Yeah.
One of the great things we do at the Tech Council is we have, as part of our membership, we have the many incubators across the state, whether they be in Baltimore, Montgomery County, and everywhere in between. So those incubators are a member of the Maryland Tech Council. But then, as a courtesy, all of their baby companies, all of those entrepreneurs are automatically a part of our organization to give them the opportunity to network and to be out there in the world and understanding how important it is to foster that type of growth that's coming from those young people.
Yeah.
And what would really be as great as that is to make sure that we have the exit of all of that research and development exiting the federal labs and exiting the universities in a way where we can have commercialization and create new growth and foster new companies here as well. We have those opportunities, but it's not easy. Right? And so part of the community, part of that ecosystem is to help foster what those transitions of different ideas and building on the DNA valley that we have here right now.
I think I think that it's, even though I've been a member of Maryland Tech Council forever, and I can, tell you personally how important it was to the growth of AGT, and you mentioned the incubator system around here. That also was the genesis of, AGT, the flexibility of that system, the support that the state and the local governments gave to the incubators, just the understanding in some ways of the ups and downs of biotech and the way that they were able to work with, people within their walls and to nurture them through those initial turbulent times, and to birth companies like AGT. And like you said, AGT is just one of, what is it, like 1,200 life science companies in this area. And I've seen a lot of them in this area. And what I love about them is they are swinging for the fences, that they have great ideas that sometimes came out of federal labs, that came out of Hopkins or University of Maryland, right? That these are folks that are really entrepreneurial, really energized about a vision for the future, and working really hard to do it. And then they land in a place like Maryland. They come naturally out of, those places, and they land in Maryland, which to me is almost the perfect soil for it. It's got a small, sort of a small town feel, while having all the resources of a major city, right? It's the... Well,
it is, and that's exactly what it is, because you have to surround yourself. And, people say, competition and, growth, and, you're competing against all these other companies, the more companies you bring in here, but you feed off of those other companies. You know this.
Yes.
Right. It's the different ideas that can be circulated so that you come up with amazing solutions to problems that we never even knew that we would have solutions before.
You really hit the nail on the head, and one of the reasons that I wanted to call this area DNA Valley, because it reminds me so much of Silicon Valley. And what you're saying right now is exactly the case. This is a rising tide. It's lifting all boats. There is, what's happening here is what we used to call back in Silicon Valley cooperation. Right?
It's a great word.
Yeah.
I love it.
And next bench syndrome, which comes back from the HP days of high tech in Silicon Valley, not the computer revolution, but actually, that when people were making new instruments at HP, there was this idea that you'd have a problem on your bench. It turned out like 3 benches over, somebody was solving that problem with another instrument that would allow you to break through a stumbling block on what you were trying to develop. And it was like this, like a nuclear reaction of creativity that was happening, and I feel that happening here. That, right down the street is the answer to every problem that we're having at AGT, and vice versa. Yeah. And that, right now we don't have to worry about, there's nobody competing with us. When there are 10,000 diseases to cure, this isn't competition. This is like the software industry. When there are 10,000 things you can do on a computer, on a cell phone, or whatever, right now what we focus on is, you got a good idea, go for it in this area, and this is just naturally the perfect place to do it. When you were talking about, sort of educating people internally to stay here and pursue their dreams here, coming out of great universities, like the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins and other schools around here, because, wow, all the way down to the community colleges, there's really amazing stuff going on here. Yeah, and even high school students that we bring in for internships, and I'm just amazed at the education that they're getting, and how ambitious and how smart they are. Great, we got to get them to stay here. But the other thing we need to do is we need to alert Boston and San Francisco that if you want a career in biotech, if you want opportunity for growth, that's accompanied by an amazing lifestyle in a place that is just a fantastic place to live, this is where you belong.
Yeah, I agree. And that marketing part of where we are, I think it has to be at the highest level of importance for the community to come together to look to see how that is going to get messaged to the rest of the world. And I think that that's something that is on my agenda. I've been living in this, on the government side for so long, looking to see how we can make that the talk of the town, no matter what town you go into and say Maryland is it. But we can. It's going to take a lot of cooperation and communication and getting it out there to the rest of the world. But it's definitely on the agenda that we have to do if we want to see that exponential growth that we're really prepared to have.
Yeah, that we're already in a situation where we're, even with the amazing talent and workforce development in Maryland, we're already facing a shortage. But this is a great opportunity for people that may be listening to this program that don't live in Maryland. Think about it, if biotech or tech, really, across the whole spectrum, is their future, that this is an area that is experiencing exponential growth. And what that means is opportunity.
It does. It's all about opportunity. And, there's some irony here, right? Because Maryland is geographically a small state compared to many other states, right? So it's bigger if you're traveling it every day, by the way. It's bigger than it appears on a map. But you've mentioned a couple places. You've mentioned Silicon Valley. You've mentioned Boston. We can talk about Raleigh, Durham, right? You can talk maybe a little bit about Nashville. Then you're talking about cities. And when we're talking about the ecosystem in Maryland, it really is all of Maryland. I mean, we have some hot spots, obviously, Montgomery County, Baltimore, Frederick, but it's not consolidated into Boston. So when we really talk about it, we have to talk about how easy it is for all of these major hubs of what we have for growth in these industries that are happening in multiple areas. But it is Maryland that we need to market. Because it is a little bit more spread out than some of the traditional other cities that have that as their urban center.
Well, so there's two ways to look at it, because I think what you're saying right now is absolutely right, that it feels like, Maryland is big and spread out and diverse, and, it's still sort of organically growing and changing its character. But you can see that there's a trend here, right? And when I think about the geography, it's about an hour from here to Baltimore, okay? It's about an hour from San Francisco to San Jose. It's about, sort of a half hour in traffic from here to Frederick. Right. It's about a half hour from Oakland to either San Jose or to San Francisco. Okay, so what we have here in terms of geography is really similar to Silicon Valley, but it's not constrained by the mountains, the ocean, and the bay. So what that means is that we won't run out of room in the same way that Silicon Valley exhausted just the space. When I still own a home in California, in Silicon Valley, and I may never sell it because they're so land constrained. It's like a bank account where, they can't grow without the value of my house going up, right?
Smart investment, I would say.
Smart investment.
Yeah.
But I think about Columbia, right? In the heart of all three of those areas, or the Montgomery County in general, and all of the different lifestyles that you can enjoy within a 20-minute drive of Montgomery County today, right? Those things are going to go up in value, and I think that even though we won't be constrained, that there will be still, easy commutes from outside of that triangle of, Montgomery County to Frederick to Baltimore, right? That, I think, is going to be the high demand area for space to grow new companies in this revolutionary technology that will take advantage of, Goldman Sachs calls it a $5 trillion industry, but I think that it's much larger than that. But even $5 trillion, right, we could get another $500 billion of economy within that triangle.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when I moved to Frederick County 20 years ago, it was a bedroom community for Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Right, and so you either worked there in a service type of industry,
bedroom,
something.
I'd call it rural. Right.
But a lot of people made that trick because it was affordable. It was much more affordable than living closer into D.C., but a lot of people made that commute. Now there's actually industry. There's a boom of growth in this industry specifically in that area, which has just done nothing but obviously boost up the investments and the the real estate and everything that's happening in the county right now. And you're right, that will spread to other parts of the state as well, which it's all has to be managed growth, though, right? I mean, let's do it strategically, but let's build these industries so we have a good place for people to come.
I hope the governor's listening to this, because I think that one of the challenges going forward over the next decade is going to be how to keep Maryland's character when there is so much growth. You don't want to constrain that growth, but at the same time, you want to manage it so that we can keep some of the lifestyle benefits that we have.
There's a lot of flavor. There's a lot of flavor here in Maryland. You know, you don't have to go far to find different flavor, I think, which is one of the greatest things about Maryland in general.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big driver of DNA Valley, is going to be that people are going to recognize, like I did, that, okay, you can miss the weather in California, but you don't miss anything else. When I first got here, and people were like, how can you move from Silicon Valley to here? I'm like, I grew up in Boston. This is like Miami to me. It's like,
I know. It's temperate, so I think
it's decent. Okay, all right. So let's put aside the weather for the moment, and if weather's the only thing on your checklist, okay, stay in California, but move down from Boston, by the way, because they don't even have, the weather here is way better. But then everything else, is great here, and you will not miss any other aspect of where you came from if you move to this area, and I will personally testify to that, having done it. And I keep meeting people that are transplants from Silicon Valley that say the same thing, and it just amazes me.
Well, I think one thing that we learned during COVID, and this is just going back to my Commerce days, because I was there at Commerce in the thick of, the grants to small businesses and making sure that everyone was there. But I think what we noticed during that period of time is that people wanted to have and be in areas where they could have an outdoor recreation opportunity. And we can talk about a lot of different parts of the country, and there's wonderful places to live, but I would say that there's very minimal states like Maryland where you can be at the ocean and to the mountains in a day, and you can experience both, and then everything in between, and there's hiking. So we developed, when I was with the administration, we developed an outdoor recreation office to be able to really highlight and grow all of that outdoor recreation type of opportunities that are everywhere, and not just for us to explore and to see and to do, but for businesses to come and create great outdoor recreational opportunities. We have a wonderful educational system. I would say we have the most PhDs in the state of Maryland and any other state in the country, and that's just a known fact. And we have lots of educational opportunities. Our kids are STEM-oriented. They have many, many opportunities to do things. There's always room for improvement, by the way, in the school system, but we're doing a good job there. And we have the businesses, and we have the neighborhoods, and we have community organizations, and we have a strong future for the leaders. But we also need to mix it in with what can we do, because not everybody in these new generations that are coming into our workforce want to work 80 hours a week and not be outside. They want to have those opportunities, and we can build that here and provide those opportunities for them.
I think it's just exists, and what you're saying is, we just need to advertise it, because it is here. And then you mentioned also the most PhDs, per capita. Well, yeah, that's natural too. Where do PhDs go to cut their teeth? NIH,
that's right.
Right? NIST, 70 federal institutions in this area, right? And then eventually
almost a third of the federal laboratories are in Maryland. Which is amazing.
Talk about education, talk about like the ultimate apprenticeship, right? Go and be a postdoc at one of those institutes and be on the cutting edge of everything, and then to come out of there and find this incredible, open space for either entrepreneurship or to join a company in high tech. And I don't think that naturally that there's any place right now in the world that, it is working as well as it's working. And then it's amazing to have visionaries like you with the experience that you have, and also the dedication to sort of public service, right, that you've shown in your career, to say what you said earlier. Of course it's great, but it can always be better, right? and to put those things in place. So anyway, this has been a fabulous time speaking with you here today, but I do want to just open this up for any advice that you have for anybody listening to this program, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they are PhDs, whether they are kids in high school that are thinking about their future, or whether they are potential transplants from Boston and San Francisco, or I hate to even mention the Raleigh-Durham area because I just don't really think about them anymore because we're doing so well.
Good,
I mean, I look at the leaders
and
how we're going to pass Boston and San Francisco.
Yeah.
But,
so for the young people,
yeah.
so break it up. So for the young people that are looking at different career opportunities, once you get into your sophomore year, people are going to start asking, or even your freshman year, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Nobody really knows what they want to do with the rest of your life, right? Take as many opportunities to figure out a bunch of different career pathways, and there's many ways to do that, and get in contact with businesses in the area just to kind of see what the hands-on kind of stuff looks like. You don't know if you want to work in a lab really until you've worked in a lab and you've seen what that experience is like.
Can I interject one thing here? Because I think you stand as an example of another thing that's really important for these people to think about, and that is that your first choice isn't your last choice, right? You see,
so many room.
I met a lot of college kids that are stressed out about what's their first job going to be out of college, and I'm like, remember it's your first job out of college, and
but
that the average person will go ahead and go through you're going to learn from that first job and make the best pick that you can, but don't feel like it is like the final decision that you're making in your life that's going to steer the rest of it. Listen to Kelly Schulz, who's been through everything, all these different careers over her lifetime, and with plenty of time to do 5 more careers, right?
Still looking.
Yeah, exactly. Still thinking about what's next after doing things at Maryland Tech Council. But the advice that you're giving about looking at these opportunities, but on the other hand, dive in when it feels great. Go ahead and go for it. For
those college kids, I would say you're going to be tempted to work, and maybe you're going to have to make a little bit of money, so you're going to maybe work at Starbucks or a bookstore, or you're going to do something. I would propose working in an industry that you ultimately want to end up in, even if it's sitting at the front desk answering phone calls. Because putting yourself in that environment for your first job out of college, let's look at how those jobs that you have in college can help to shape what that looks like.
You are so right. How many times our receptionist has moved into the company, into, the lab or marketing
because
or
they're
whatever.
Now a trusted member of your organization.
Exactly. It's the same thing as internships, when you get to know the people, because a lot of it is, sort of character and culture compatibility that makes a great employee, and then the only other things you're asking for is smart and hardworking, and you come out of a good school, which a lot of people do, and you demonstrate your work ethic, and then opportunities just abound in these growing companies.
That is, it's all about what you put into it, the relationships that you make. People joke about it all the time. It's about who you know, but it's about who you have intentionally gotten to know to be a part of what your future kind of looks like. And then, we'll fast track to those people that are, settled in their careers, and they feel very comfortable. They've made advancements. They've discovered, solutions to problems that we've had, for generations, and now they're on that way. And my advice to them is to never underestimate what their words can be to the people that are now wanting to follow in their footsteps.
Oh, okay. So
because
you're saying mentor somebody,
mentoring
right?
people, mentoring small companies, going into colleges, talking to young people about what their journey has looked like, and helping them, not doing things for them, but there's so many resources, and there's so many people, and there's so many ways of doing things that is another way to retain that talent that we need to have in Maryland as well, is to create those relationships, and that helps to build us and create more opportunities, and to solve many more problems that are going to make all of us happier in the future.
Yeah. Well, Great time talking to you, and I hope we'll do this again sometime. I mean, you're really almost just starting at Maryland Tech Council, and I'm already seeing things happening, and I just feel the excitement and momentum speaking with you, and really believe you're focused on the right stuff for developing this area. So happy to have you at Maryland Tech Council, and so happy to have you here speaking with me and with our audience, and thanks for all of your thoughts and advice.
Of course, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. Thank you.